Okay. I call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for February 29th, 2024. It is 10:18 in the morning. And I will go ahead and lead us in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Happy Leap Day, everybody. I don't think we will see another Thursday Leap Day until 2052. I think that's 2052 or 2054.
I don't have time to do that.
All right. Item C is our calendar session. Commissioners, anything to add to the calendar? I have a MWAC.
I'm
Now
trying-
you're
Trying to figure out how old I have to be, sorry.
This will be my last leap day.
Easy.
Thursday Leap Day.
Yeah.
It's Thursday specific.
Either way, this is it. I'm going to enjoy it.
MWAC is next week. I don't know if that was on the calendar, right? 3/7. Are you the only one going to MWAC right now?
Probably.
And then I have the Yamhill County Forest Land meeting at 1 p.m. on March 5th at Yamhill Fire District. I might be the only one going, but just in case. And then we have AOC meetings on the 8th,
On Monday and Friday.
Monday, Friday. Okay.
Mhm.
Did you get the invitation for the Forest Land meeting?
No,
Are you interested?
sure.
Okay. I don't know how that came through.
It was an email.
Okay.
I,
And that's just, they do that every 4 years, but this is just an update to stay current, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's 1 to 3 p.m. Yamhill Fire. Yeah. Okay, item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. And I want to acknowledge we did receive some written comment, mostly about the topic that we discussed last week. But we do have one card for today. John George, welcome, John, if you want to come forward. And then if you're online and you want to provide just general public comment, please raise your virtual hand. Welcome.
Good morning.
Want me to sit here?
Yes. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. And so I thank you for this time to commissioners, sub two. And so I want to speak to out of respect for each and every one of you also. So I didn't, am I speaking loud enough to? Just want to make sure that, okay. Yeah, so today I speak out of respect for all of you in sub two, and I'm here as a Whitecap vice chair and chosen as the Whitecap ambassador for you. And so I'd like to read into record today a statement that's prepared for you all. And so the Whitecap Board of Directors would like to respond to various public comments made in the last month at Yamhill County Board of Commissioners meetings. There has been some information offered to you that Whitecap would like clarified and corrected on the record. First, I would like to speak about 4 items that Mayor Rossacker mentions in his most recent letter to the board. The first issue is regarding the construction timeline for Whitecap's property related to any door place in Newburgh. Unfortunately, the project at hand involved an older building that required significant renovations and facility upgrades to increase the number of beds available and to address health and safety issues within the building. While it is disappointing that construction was delayed, this was due to circumstances that were not within Whitecap's control. As the commissioners well know, any development project faces challenges that are unknown prior to starting and takes time to work through. The most significant issues that Whitecap faced with this particular project were delays experienced with the City of Newburgh Planning Department. The permitting process took much longer than anticipated as the city imposed more stringent conditions to approval than experienced elsewhere. The City of Newburgh failed to recognize and fully comply with the State of Oregon House Bill 2006 and House Bill 4051, which authorized the creation of navigation centers and delineated appropriate processes for local jurisdictions, including an expedited review that does not include review under state or local land use requirements. As noted before, construction projects are outside of the ordinary course of Whitecap's core services. So the assertion that Whitecap should have expected expensive upgrades to city infrastructure is misplaced. That said, City of Newburgh leadership was updated not only in the meetings mentioned to Mayor Rossacker, but detailed updates were provided via email generally and each time he requested. He was not in the dark, nor was Whitecap intentionally evasive about the construction timeline. Partners in city leadership were provided up-to-date information Whitecap had at the time. Second, Mayor Rossacker mentions that Whitecap imposed a sudden need to find space and fund a temporary emergency shelter in Newburgh on the city and the organization, Community Wellness Collective. The site was closed for construction in March 2023. This was after months of planning, which the City of Newburgh was included in. As mentioned by Whitecap's executive director, CWC was also aware of the closure of the facility and that Whitecap would not renew its existing shelter contract and lease for CWC for the following year. Again, this was shared with CWC months in advance. CWC was offered the opportunity to enter into a new contract and failed to meet several deadlines. CWC also severed the last contractual relationship and any future partnership options of their own choice on June 23rd, 2023. On a separate note, the state of Oregon has stringent requirements for the funds it distributes to Whitecap and expects that all sub-recipients of Whitecap comply with the same. As Whitecap identifies sub-recipient opportunities, it must consider keeping Whitecap programs wholly funded and in compliance prior to sub-granting resources to other organizations. While it is regrettable that CWC did not have enough funding to continue its own shelter operations, it is not Whitecap's duty to fund a third-party organization. Whitecap did not spring this situation on the City of Newburgh or CWC as implied. Further, while this facility was closed, additional motel sheltering rooms were opened, providing at least, if not more, beds than would normally be accessible at the shelter through a Whitecap program. Sheltering alternatives were available at all points. CWC and the city were fully informed of the additional sheltering plans. As such, the comment that CWC only had a week to figure out a space and funding for the houseless population in Newburgh is not accurate. During this time, Whitecap provided sheltering options for those needing assistance at or above its previous offerings. If CWC, the city, or the county would like to extend additional resources through other avenues, Whitecap welcomes that. Not one organization can be all things to all people. Third, Mayor Rossacker questions why personal information about Whitecap clients are not being shared. Whitecap has internal policies that are committed to keeping personal information confidential. Fourth, Mayor Rossacker has questioned why Whitecap facilities are not available to be seen. Whitecap is not a public entity with public facilities. In addition, its staff has many different tasks and work required of them. As such, on-demand tours are simply not feasible. Further, I would like to address the notes from Ms. Kate Stokes. On behalf of the Community Wellness Collective Board of Directors, I am not sure where the board has obtained their information regarding shelter beds available at the Newburgh site. YCAP is intending to open the Any Door Place shelter with up to 24 beds based on occupancy requirements and households assessing the shelter. If 24 beds are not met, it is YCAP's intention to continue to provide motel sheltering to bridge any gap. Both the City of Newburgh and CWC have been fully aware of the occupancy limits of the site and shelter bed availability. YCAP is committed to working to help with the unsheltered problems affecting the county. However, sheltering is not YCAP's sole function in Yamhill County and cannot be expected that it would have the resources nor ability to house and feed every single individual in the county needing services. It should be noted that the City of Newburgh, Yamhill County, and CWC have provided no funding towards the ADP Newburgh facility, and as such, YCAP is under no contractual obligations to these jurisdictions regarding ADP Newburgh operations. Additionally, in recent days, Commissioner Berschauer sent an email to YCAP requesting a comment why YCAP invited Commissioner Johnston to serve on the YCAP board and is better suited to serve than Commissioner Sterrett. YCAP will not provide comment on internal board discussions or its executive sessions. However, Commissioner Sterrett has publicly shared why she was removed from YCAP's board. Unfortunately, that relationship of trust and partnership has deteriorated with Commissioner Sterrett. As such, if the commission is still interested in having a liaison between the board and YCAP, we enthusiastically extend the invitation to Commissioner Johnston. Finally, all pertinent operational questions have already been answered via letter by Executive Director Alexandra Ball. If you have any additional questions specific to the current contract with Yamhill County and the dispersal of funds, please submit them in writing to Director Ball. And this is all the information that I would like to share on behalf of YCAP leadership and staff. So I thank you, each and every one of you, for your time today.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Okay, is there any further public comment? And if you're online, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, hearing none, we will move forward to department updates. There's nothing today. And before we get to our work session, because it's going to be probably a bit of a lengthy conversation, there is a request to move the public hearing up since there is a specific request for remand. If everyone's okay procedurally with that, can move it up.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will move our public hearing up, and that is item J1, docket PAZ-02-23, approval of a comprehensive plan amendment from public or P to industrial I and a zone change from PAI Public Assembly Institution to LI Light Industrial. The applicant is Orchard and Vineyard Supply LLC, and its tax lot number 5417-00301. And procedurally, I'm not sure how to, if I have to open it so that we.
I wouldn't. I would just explain how we got a letter, make sure it's in the record. And go ahead, Ken. I know you had a.
Okay. Oh, hi, Ken.
Sorry, I didn't know it was going to be pushed up. I just wanted to say that the county zoning ordinance section 1403.5 states in part that the board may affirm, modify, or reverse all or part of the actions of the director, planning commission, or hearings officer, or may remand the matter back to the decision-making body for additional review or information. For this application, the interested buyers of the property have backed out of the sale, and the owners wish to modify the limited use overlay placed by the planning commission, and this would require additional information to be submitted. Therefore, the owners would like the board to remand this matter back to the planning commission and then direct our office to send out new notice when the planning commission hearing is set. We have no objection to this action, and I should also note that we haven't had any opposition to this request. So, and you can say so moved after I read this if it sounds suitable, but I think the board could pass a motion that states, based on the owner's request to submit additional information related to the zone change, the board shall remand docket PAZ-02-23 back to the planning commission and direct staff to send out new public notice prior to the hearing.
So
And
moved.
it's okay. That's okay. We're
Oh.
fine. You forgot the additional information piece, but that's okay.
Oh, I thought I said, based on the owner's request to submit additional information.
Okay, my bad. Yeah. Pretend I didn't say anything.
It's too late.
Okay, so there's a motion. We did have Mr. Hageberg's here. I don't know if you want to a few words while we have you here, since you joined us.
Well,
Welcome.
my name is Dave Hogberg. I am the president of MV Advancements. I appreciate all the work that has been done by the planning staff on the consideration of the appropriate use of this piece of property. Unfortunately, just before we were ready to move to this body, that transaction fell apart. It was, as has been said, the whole plan for the zoning of this property was really kind of designed for one buyer. When that's gone away, we think that it's a very valuable piece of property that could have for the community. I mean, it's got all kinds of opportunities. And as we look to what to do, we want it to go back to the planning commission and to the planning staff so that we can have a new conversation about what is the right use of that property before we decide what's going to happen with it. So that's why, and we very much appreciate your consideration.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Hageberg?
None.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
All right. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great. It will be remanded.
And with your leave, I get about 10 seconds to tell you that on April 2nd, they're going to open the bids for the construction of the first part of the interchange at 219 on the bypass. So cross your fingers that the bids come in at a level where we have the right number of dollars to make it happen. So
Low bids.
thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks. Okay, so we've covered the procedural, so we're just coming back into, gonna go back into our agenda. All right.
And it's also up to the board. If you wanted to move the work session to the end to get through the other agenda items, it's completely at the discretion of the board.
Okay, how do we feel about that?
I think because we have Director Lago here and we've got other folks here, maybe we could move that to the end.
Yep.
Might take a while.
We're moving the fun part to the end. Excuse me. Okay, so we can move our work session down. Item G is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, and I just want to thank Jim and Nessa for their service and just their passion for parks. They've been invaluable members of the Parks Board. And it's been noticed that there's a continuity in that board now and an excitement and a vision, and they've got great plans. And so they're all very excited about serving, and we appreciate them.
And Commissioner
Ditto.
Johnston.
Yes. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Item H is old business. There's nothing today. Item I, other business. I1, consideration of the first reading of ordinance 932, adopting the Yamhill County Construction Erosion and Sediment Control Code and amending the Yamhill County Code Enforcement Code. Lots of codes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So it's an ordinance, so we got to
or
do
first
a
reading.
reading, yeah. So we're
Okay.
on first reading.
And we do by title only?
If that's. Okay, I'll go for it. In the matter of adopting the Yamhill County Construction Erosion and Sediment Control Code, amending the Yamhill County Code Enforcement Code and setting the effective date.
Okay, so we did our first reading. I do have a couple questions on this, and we have Director Lago here.
And Nick.
And Nick, welcome, welcome. And the first reading is all we have to do today, right? We don't, yeah, okay. Okay. So a couple quick questions. How much, do we know how much the county permit will be?
Just Mayor, I'd like to introduce first,
Oh,
this
sure.
is Nick Wilkerson. He is our vegetation management supervisor. So this is kind of his realm. This is the reason why we've actually hired him to help us out with this kind of thing.
Great, welcome, Nick.
But what was that question again?
How much will the county permit be, the county piece?
Mr.
Ken
Friday?
Friday, you want to talk?
Yes, in talking with the building official and what would be involved in the inspection, we've come up with a quarter to a half acre would be $200. A half to 3/4 of an acre would be $400 for the inspection, and then 3/4 to 1 acre would be $600. I will say that I really doubt that we're going to have too many of these come through, just because most of our projects, as far as building, are going to be far less than a 1/4 acre of disturbed land. But for those larger projects, those are the fees that we anticipate charging.
Okay, and then, so I guess with that, are the fines that are noted in this, are they in line and similar with other permits that we have in terms of fines for other permits?
I would say yes. And Jody might want to elaborate on that.
But generally speaking, if you're fined under our zoning code, we follow the statutory minimum presumptive fines that are laid out there for violations. This would be lower than that in terms of maximum.
Okay.
But there's discretion for whoever's doing the enforcement to go with this fine instead of what's dictated in statute. So that's sort of what that allows for, so that
Okay.
you don't have to go with statute. You can go lower.
Okay. Any concerns, commissioners?
None.
Okay, any further questions for Director Lago or Nick? Nope. Okay,
No.
so we have done our first reading. You might want to stick around for the next one. So I
We
can,
need to vote on that one, or we're just gonna just leave it?
yeah, okay. So I'm going to move on to item I2. Consideration of approval of an intent to award construction to Haworth, Inc. for the 2024 Pike Road Bridge Superstructure Replacement Project in the amount of $494,209.50. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, any discussion or questions?
None.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good to see you. I3 is consideration of approval of service element prior authorization number 873-40653 under the agreement between Yamhill County and the Oregon Department of Human Services, Board Order 23-367, for the financing of community developmental disability services in the amount of $107,228.40. And this is regarding that emergency preparedness money for folks with developmental disabilities that we have talked about previously.
I move approval.
Commissioner Sterrett moves approval. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes. Thank you. I4, consideration of approval of agreement number 44300-0002611 between Yamhill County and the Oregon Health Authority to fund Choice Model Services in the amount of $311,525, retroactive to January 1st, 2024 through June 30th of 2025.
And Chair, this funds mental health services and coordination at the local level for adults with high mental health needs.
And from what I read, it encourages more of an independent
Yes.
living rather than being
Institutionalized.
institutionalized. Yeah.
Mhm.
Any further questions?
None.
Move approval.
Move approval. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, the next three items, 5, 6, and 7. I'll read them real quick here and I guess we need to kind of separate them. So let me invite Joya up first and maybe Joya, if you want to give your overview update and then we'll kind of tackle them one by one, that would be great. Welcome.
Good
Welcome.
morning. Thank you for giving me time today. So I wanted to update you on the ARPA childcare funding recommendations the board approved on December 21st, 2023. To just remind everyone what we talked about then, the approved recommendations were to address the need for trained early childhood education teachers, financial support while they attend training, and expand childcare provider opportunities. We recommended a contract with Chemeketa Community College to provide a 14-week training program each year for the next 3 years for up to 25 students per cohort over the next 3 years, including stipends for the students, and that was $760,386. Second, to address the need to expand childcare options and train teachers, we recommended a contract with George Fox University for the planning, co-design, architectural rendering, and construction development and construction furniture and fixtures and equipment for 12 to 15,000 square foot training, research, and childcare center on the university campus, and that was $1 million. Lastly, to create more childcare slots, we recommended a contract with Northwest Christian Church to expand the zone, a free after-school care program to 4 additional schools in Yamhill County, and that came to $369,614. After the December meeting, each applicant was provided the standard ARPA funding contract the county has been using for such funding agreements. 2 of the applicants have submitted revised contracts. 1 contract had no changes. The contract with Northwest Christian Church did not have any revisions or changes. I recommend approval of this contract as submitted. Chemeketa Community College submitted a change that decreases their indirect costs and changes the amounts available to students for stipends. Students will receive $5,338.68 to participate in the program versus the $5,775 that the board approved. This was due to a formula error in the original proposal and was not caught until contract review. The revision does not change the amount of funding approved by the board of $760,386. I recommend the board approve the contract with Chemeketa Community College as submitted. George Fox University submitted the following changes to the contract. You've all got copies of their contract. It is redlined for you. I can go through each one of them if you'd like. We do we've invited a representative from George Fox to explain the changes to you. I don't know if he's on the call yet. No. So if you'd like, would you like me to go through these changes with you?
Why don't we, if we're comfortable, we can tackle the first 2 maybe, and maybe give a little bit more time for him to join.
Absolutely.
Mr. Daly, is it?
Yes.
Okay, so we can start with item I5, which is consideration of approval and to authorize the county administrator to execute a grant agreement between Yamhill County and Northwest Christian Church, expanding the zone after-school program into 4 Yamhill County schools in the amount of $369,614, effective for 12 months upon full execution.
Sure, I would move approval.
Okay, any further questions, concerns?
Nope.
Okay, I'm excited to see this roll out.
Mhm.
This one's good.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes. Thank you. I6 is consideration of approval and to authorize the county administrator to execute grant agreement number 10757-400 between Yamhill County and Chemeketa Community College for the Early Childhood Educator Educational Development Program in the amount of $760,386 effective for 12 months upon full execution. I will move approval. Is there further discussion or questions?
No.
Now, this one changed cost-wise, right? It went down, but the money's still the same per.
The indirect
Stipend.
costs, they decrease the indirect costs. The students receiving the money is going to be slightly less than we had anticipated.
Because the indirect cost lowered. So the
Because there
students
was a
don't-
mathematical error
Okay.
in
It
the,
was-
in the,
Math.
Okay.
The math
In
was
the-
wrong.
Minimal amount.
we didn't catch it.
Yep.
I think
Okay.
it's less than a $400 change is what
It's
I remember.
a small amount, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. Did I move approval? Okay.
Mhm.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes. Thank you. And then, oh, good. Looks like we might have Sean on. Okay. So item 7 is discussion of requested revisions to a grant agreement for George Fox University Child Development Facility. And we heard about some of those changes from Joya. And we are joined by Sean Daly. Sean, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So I apologize. I'm at a conference in Arizona. So my apologies. I'm in a public space, and so I'll do my best to moderate noise around me.
As long as you're not showing us the sunshine. it's
Yeah.
It is 71 degrees and beautiful here. I will have to say. So
We lost Sean. Where'd Sean go? Okay, so this agreement, Joya touched on it a little bit, but essentially was $1 million grant proposal that would create roughly 100 spots, right? And it would be sort of divided up
It would-
into 3 parts
Correct.
between ADEC and GFU and the public.
Mhm.
And it looks like the contract has shifted a little bit in terms of how those funds are going to be used or rolled out. And so I don't know, Mr. Daly, if you want to speak to those changes, I think that would be helpful for us.
I don't think that we've made radical changes, and we've redacted a number of those changes. So the principle, some of the, first off, I want to thank the commission. When we came in back in, I think it was October, we honestly didn't expect to get your support. So we were actually very thankfully surprised, that the commission was willing to support us. And when we were given the contract, I just wanted to say that we were said, hey, you could suggest changes. But we had always taken the position that if any of those changes were problematic, that we'd redact them immediately. And so the thing that we did change and that we'd asked about was that given the time frame to be able to use this money, that the positions that we had initially proposed probably wouldn't spend the amount. And so we said that we wanted to still hire the 2 positions, which would be a child care executive director / consultant and a project manager, but that we also wanted to utilize the material from the first phase to potentially hire a grant writer, mainly because we became aware through this process of the child care infrastructure bill that Business Oregon is executing. And so we were told to pursue that. We don't necessarily have the joint expertise currently, and so we wanted to utilize that to be able to potentially get someone on board. And that's, I think, the principal change to the first part of this. I don't know that we've made any radical adjustments elsewhere. We had suggested in conversation that we might make some changes, but we removed those in consultation with the Yamhill County staff. So I believe the contract, and I would hope that Joya would confirm this, is fairly similar to what we had been given and that we were ready to execute and sign on.
Okay,
I would
so
agree.
there was some conversation around a feasibility study, and I don't want to
Yeah.
really dive into that, but I think that from the board's perspective, when we first talked about this, we assumed that there was a feasibility study already done, considering this is on GFU property and, you guys have a lot of free reign to design that property how you see fit. And also with the partnership of ADEC, that there was an immediate need for childcare and sort of that, the momentum was already there, which is why you came forward. So I was kind of surprised to hear a feasibility study mentioned because
That wasn't a change that had been made to the contract. And then after conversation with Sean, they removed that piece. So it
Yeah.
had,
Okay.
but it is not on there. Go ahead, Sean. My apologies.
No, we have a significant plan that is proprietary information, and Joya had asked about that. So we have a document that we share with ADEC that includes that. It's unfortunate that in one of the versions of this, our CFO, we always want to hedge risk. And so in her case, I know that she wanted to have additional, hey, let's continue to do research work. But I mean, at this stage, we are going forward. We have done the research on the costs. We have done research on the needs in terms of the facility. And the hope of our phase one is to hire, if we do anything, it's to get someone to help us to execute the educational model between all three of the community need, the research needs of the university, and the employer-based needs of ADEC. And so we probably could have phrased that differently. And I realize what gets keyed off when you see the words feasibility study. But we have all of our material and research prepared at this particular point.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Yes, I have some questions. Thanks for being here, Sean.
Mhm.
A
Of
couple-
course.
With all due respect, the proprietary nature of something, we're being asked to fund something that's $1 million of taxpayer money. And looking at, okay, we have a plan, we can't share the plan, and I do understand that piece, but I do have some questions about how far along this is, since we came to this rather late. I want to make sure that there's a substantial foundation for moving forward. So there's that piece. And then also in terms of the extension request, I'm wondering, in terms of completing the project, plans to complete the project, there was a request from 12 to 18 months. So I'm just looking at this sort of from the broader perspective of, here's $1 million, but we don't know how much of the foundational aspect of this really does inform what you're doing and then what we're being asked to fund. That's the only question that I have at this point.
So I apologize, Commissioner. I mean, are you asking what can I answer for you in terms of that foundational work specifically? And I'm happy to attempt to do so.
Well, again, when we look at the initial ask, it was that there were also comments made that there was significant community sort of promissory notes, in a way that there was some buy-in from the community, to the degree that this $1 million was basically just a drop in the bucket. There was a total of $12 million. Was that the original?
Mm-hmm.
So that there was more money needing to come, and this was only a fraction of it. So that was my question, in terms of, we have buy-in, and we also have a plan, but we're not going to share that, but we want $1 million. So I just, I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here to make sure that we have enough of a rationale for committing these funds.
No, certainly. First off, we've done internal surveys of our employees about the critical need for childcare services. And both of our organizations, as major employers in the Newburgh area, want to retain our employees and to keep them inside of the city of Newburgh. And so this effort, in conjunction with the work that we're trying to do on missing middle housing, we feel is critically important to being able to support people living and working in Yamhill County. And so the first portion of our work was around making sure that we could ensure that both of our organizations would be able to fully utilize the 50 slots that each of us needed. And we feel that we proved that to our internal capacity, to being willing to both commit property and finances to be able to get this done. We were unaware when we were doing this project initially of the Business Oregon, I guess I forget the House bill number, but the childcare infrastructure work, which we want to pursue to be able to potentially expedite the project, because we were going to be doing, a fundraising campaign for part of that funding, which is why when we first had come, I think that your concern was the timeline that we were under, where we were trying to get something that would be done later than you had hoped. But I think that our hope is to be able to do it quicker if we're able to access those Business Oregon funds, which have been made available. And thus, again, be able to have a grant writer. We've also examined what the critical need in Yamhill County is. And so we did our own internal study as to how much of a desert Yamhill County is. And I think you're aware from your own research, of how significant childcare is needed in this particular space. And so we have faculty who are behind this initiative. We have ADEC staff who are behind this initiative. We have members of the controlling interest of ADEC that's interested in this particular piece. And the reason I'm not the reason I would not share information is because we were gifted materials from other companies that have done this type of work for employer-based childcare. And I didn't, when I had received that information, I never had said to them, hey, is it okay if I share this broadly? And so I feel like I would be breaking their confidence and trust sharing what is their private information publicly.
Understood. And yeah, we did get a real clear picture of what the need was, both from employers and families in general, as far as finding places for their children, quality childcare. The other question I had a little bit was in terms of the number of slots available to the community at large, and those that would be designated for George Fox and ADEC. And I guess what I want to make sure is that we are not sort of picking and choosing to fund those initiatives to the detriment of the community at large. And I know that was something that we've had that discussion ongoing.
Yes, excuse me, but we had always hoped to be able to have 50 slots that we reserve for the community at large. If we're able to build a space that would take, that could grow larger. I mean, we had talked at times of having a 200 student facility, in which case 100 would go to the community at large. We had always felt that we would hold 50 for George Fox and its community and 50 for ADEC and its community. And then if those are below, then we would open it up further to the community as well. But at no version of this project have we ever not thought that we wanted to have open community spaces. And we would have to work with our educational consultant to be able to design what we feel is an equitable process. And part of that process, Commissioner, would also be to do some co-design with community members as to what would be the best way to do that equitably.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think, and this is the difficult part about these, because the first two we approved they're quote unquote shovel ready, right? These folks are ready to go. They're going to be spending this money on day one. This is a bit different when you're looking at a capital construction type of project. And I know that when we were talking with the DCI about their plans, I mean, they had a childcare facility in their plans long before this grant ever existed. It was part of their future. They had a lot of that idea already baked into what they had going on. And yet they were concerned about the timeline, right? They were concerned about meeting our timelines for spending funds, and to the point where they just said, you know what, we're not ready. So I do still have some of those concerns. And I think that, the great thing is that there are some construction related issues in the city that are going really, really well, right? Last week, the city of Newburgh voted to eliminate SDCs for childcare facilities. That's huge, right? So there's some things going really, really well. I guess my concern is I don't know that I could tell you I have a full understanding of where the project is at in terms of being able to spend the funds by our deadline.
Which is December of 26.
Right. And so, with that said, there was a part of the contract that I have item number 2. I don't know if that's actually how it's delineated, but it says that George Fox must pay back all funds as part of the contract. What does that actually mean? Can we further sort of define what that means? If it's not,
I'm going to turn that over to Ken because he knows more about those contracts
okay,
and those
I got it.
requirements.
I can pull it. I just.
Here, it's right here. I think that's what we're talking about.
It kind of almost looked like it was a typo.
Is that what
But
you're talking about? That, I don't know, I just handed it.
What's the specific question?
So it's in terms of agreement number 2, if recipient does, it should say, does not complete the project in accordance with this agreement, recipient shall pay back all of the grant funds to the county. So is that everything? Is it, what does
That's
that
the way
mean?
The contract, and I'll probably look at council as far as, the discussion. The intent is, we're writing a check for $1 million for a project that was, described in the attached scope of work. And if for whatever reason we reach the term of the contract and the project hasn't been completed, for the same way that we would be on the hook to potentially return the funds to the treasury, we'd be looking at the grantee. You said you were going to do the work, the project didn't happen, and we would expect reimbursement for that, because again, this is one that we're pushing the timeline out to
Mhm.
the end of the spending obligation under ARPA. And so if there's not compliance and the project hasn't been implemented, Treasury is going to be looking for the county to return those funds because those funds were not spent. So this allows us to work with the grant recipient. Grant recipient has a responsibility to return those funds and pay back the county if they don't implement the project.
Okay, so it's any unspent funds.
All funds.
Yeah, no, we were under the understanding that it was all funds and we were prepared to agree to that.
Because I think if it was anything less than that, I think we'd be talking about a different scope of work attached to it. If you were funding an element of a project, if you were funding, all of our grant awards have this language that we've done this, that we're giving you X amount to do the project. If you don't do the project, we would expect the funds would be returned, because I want to make sure we're not out of compliance with Treasury guidelines as well.
Okay. So I mean, I think the risk is that we sort of front load the project in some ways, and then there's no guarantee, even if they spend the funds, right, on what they said they were going to, then there's no guarantee of how long it actually takes to produce a childcare facility. And that's
And
the
the one
risk.
part that I'd put out, this is the original grant agreement. And now I'm not something that a future board would be open to, or, or the board would be open to in the future, but grant agreements, projects, they get amended. If for some reason there was a modification to the scope of work, they would contact the grant manager at the county or contact me and saying, we need to modify the scope of work. I would bring that modification back before the board and we would have those discussions. So if there was a need to, well, we implemented 5 out of 6 things in the project, we're not going to do item 2, there could be possibly an amendment to the grant agreement to facilitate a return of funds, associated with that or something. I'm just saying that all of our contracts have this language because, again, we really hope to make the investment and the project as proposed will get fully implemented. And that's what this grant award and contract is intended to do. And if there's concerns about meeting that scope of work, they could always come back to the county and have that discussion at that time. But I would hope it wouldn't be November of 2026 or
Mhm.
just,
Or we have a plan B
correct.
ready to go.
Right. Christian, feel free to weigh in if you have thoughts or if I'm incorrect on that.
No, you're right. It's a standard provision that gives the county the right to request that the funds be returned if the project isn't completed. And it would entirely be up to the board at some point in the future if they chose to exercise that right or not. Would likely depend largely on whether or not it would put us out of compliance with our upstream obligations. I will say one more thing. There was one other change that I wanted to bring to the board's attention. It's under recipients obligations. So that's section 2, number 18. There was a change made to add a phrase at the start of that paragraph for the term of this agreement as described in section 1(3). Recipient understands and agrees, and then it continues on from there. And then there was that same similar language at the end of this provision, but no longer than the term in section 1(3). And the intent behind this provision as it was originally drafted was to ensure that the recipient understood and agreed that to the extent real property and structures were part of the project, that for the duration of the time during which that property is used for a purpose for which the federal funding is made available, it would continue to be used for that same purpose, so that we're not providing we're providing funding for childcare that in 5 years doesn't get repurposed for workforce development or some other equally laudable but different purpose, or for a completely unrelated purpose. So I am a little bit uncertain as to why George Fox has asked to insert that phrase at the start of the paragraph. So if that is also a question that the board shares, that may be appropriate for Sean to also address, or Joya, if you have an answer to that.
I'll let Sean answer that question because that is something that I believe their attorney may have included in this contract.
Yeah, I don't want to plead ignorance in this one because I'll own the responsibility. Like, I mean, that wasn't language that was inserted. I apologize for missing that. But similar to my prior comment, I mean, if that is the direction I have from my supervisor, our CFO, if that's language that is troubling to this going through, then we're more than willing to redact or to eliminate that. Sorry for my lack of, I did not pick that up, so I appreciate you picking it up, Christian.
Okay, well, it sounds like we need to follow up on that piece. Are we, well, I guess I should ask the board. Is there maybe, since we've sort of have these lingering hesitations, is there a way to maybe fund the first piece and see what the plan says, and then something like that? Because I guess when I'm looking at obtaining furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that's typically something you do when there's a building built. You don't buy the furniture and then you sort of fit it to the building. It just seems a little bit off in terms of the progression. And I understand the thought process behind that to make sure that the money is spent on time, but I guess I might feel a little bit more comfortable with starting with the plan.
Because I had the same observation. I was looking at item C, which is the furniture, fixtures, and child-specific equipment. When you talk about the plan, are you talking about A and B, which would equal $500,000? Is that the plan, or are you talking about the plan as in strictly and not the architectural rendering, construction, development? So those two pieces being what you're talking about is a plan?
I think that start with the plan. Because I think in my mind, I was thinking there was already the feasibility study plan / this is where we can do this. This is what complies with X, Y, and Z. And I'm not clear that that is where we're at. So
Commissioner, if I could just speak for a second. Again, we do have our business plan and we do have our research for that work. And so phases one, we have our consultant lined up to be able to hire to do the educational program. We have a project manager ready to be hired. And we also have a grant writer to be able to pursue additional funds. And we do have engagements ready to go for our architectural renderings. I completely respect your right to hold on to what is listed as like Part C of that if you see fit. As a university, we do have ample storage space, and we were trying to meet the confines of what the original request was to us when the city of Newburgh told us about this particular opportunity. And so we are in a position, though, I mean, from a go state. And again, if I didn't express this earlier, we've been working on childcare development since September of 2020. This has been a 3-year effort, and we have been working jointly with ADEC for the last 18 months. And so I recognize that you don't have all of that information in our original proposal, and I apologize for that. But we feel like we are at a clear point of maybe not being able to break ground, but of putting all of those components in place to be able to activate this. And our sincere hope is to be able to get it done sooner than we had originally spoken about when we came back in October.
okay. Thank you. Thoughts, commissioners?
I'm okay with this. I mean, the time frames are pretty tight, but I think if we just, in the worst case scenario, that we end up having to claw these back because they don't come to terms of the agreement, I think as long as we have a plan B, I feel comfortable with it. Or periodic updates as they're progressing through the project, which they're going to have to do anyway for us. But I guess we just want to make sure that those do make it to us so we know where we're at.
And we are happy to provide those at the junctures that you see fit. And we'll follow your guidelines as we do for all federal, state, and regional grants.
I have mixed thoughts on this in terms of the how, I don't want to use the term baked, how developed everything is. So I appreciate that there are plans, there have been discussions, but what I'm looking at is, Commissioner, when you talk about a plan B, we then get funds back that haven't been utilized in the way the contract prescribes, and now we're scrambling to try to go through this whole process and get those funds out the door. And as we know, this has taken a couple of years. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
I'm more inclined to take more of a cautious, more conservative approach to designating funds for this project and saying, all right, what if we fund either the A and B part of this and not the last part? Because again, I look at the community, if there is, and I believe there is a lot of support in the community to come up with furniture, fixtures, and equipment for an existing childcare center. I think that would be an easier ask for the community than for the first two pieces, which we could go ahead and fund. So I think that the community can step up and the employers can step up. But as far as our expenditure, I would go with either just A or A and B, which would bring us up to 500,000. And then the other 500,000, we certainly have in our community needs, and certainly within the county that we could look at funding those within the guidelines that ARPA prescribes.
Okay, so we've got some tweaks to the contract anyway that we've got to work on with Christian. Commissioner Johnston, thoughts on if we green light the first two items and then maybe hit pause on the last one.
Yeah, I'm all right with that. I still feel very confident in Sean's plan and with the partners that are involved with this project that, I mean, I can't sit here and guarantee that they're going to get it done, but I can only address I'm being given, and I feel confident that
Mhm.
with everybody that's involved, this thing will come to fruition.
If I can speak to that just for a second, like again, I respect your right to reserve the funding. You know, that there's an insinuation I'm hearing with regards to our two organizations as employers needing to pony up the remaining funds that you might take away from Part C. I mean, again, this project is not going to be covered by this particular grant alone. This is a multiple $million project for which ADEC, like, you know, as a corporation entity, its owners, like, you know, George Fox and its funders will be committing significant resources for a community good. And so I just want to make an appeal. Like, you know, when we pitched for that particular funding amount, yes, you could use it for other resources, but I mean, that $500,000 will go to buy supplies, like, you know, that are necessary for doing child development that will be for this community. And we do have a scheme and a plan for being able to do that. If you wanted to time the release of that funding until I could redact a plan so you could see that, I'm more than happy to oblige by that. But I feel to remove that from this proposal takes away the opportunity of what will be a community resource, having a resource that will serve the children of Yamhill County. Okay, and I don't appreciate necessarily the insinuation that, like, you know, we should be ponying up everything when we will be funding the vast majority of this particular enterprise and are committed to doing it and promise to do so.
Sean, sorry if there was a misunderstanding there. When I talk about the greater community, I'm not talking about, for instance, ADEC or George Fox coming up with the, you know, the lion's share of that. What I was referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong, is in the beginning when the proposal was made, I understood that there was broad support within the community at large, that there was more interest and lots of support that you had determined existed in the community. So I'm not just talking about the principals here, I'm talking about the larger community, whether it's benefactors or you know, any kind of philanthropic contribution. So that was my understanding.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that it's clear, though, that we have an obligation as commissioners spending not our own money, but taxpayer money, that we're making wise investments, and that if that investment is $500,000 in furniture that then sits in a warehouse for 5 to 7 years, perhaps, you know, is the public going to say that was a good use of funds? We have to be able to answer that question. So I hope that the scrutiny that we have to apply is not an assumption that we feel that George Fox or ADEC has to pony up more money. It's just simply the calculation that we have to make in every grant agreement that we do.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so I think what I would like to see at least is a deeper look at some of that language that in the contract that was changed or maybe needs to be changed back, but also a version that would simply have the first two pieces. And then we can set aside the numbers or letter C, the $500,000 for the furniture, whatever it is, as an option. So we have this option. Maybe the language needs to be cleaned up a little bit in the current one, but we also have option B that we can then deliberate on. Okay. If that makes sense and works for everybody.
So you're still going to bring forward both options? Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, because the current one, I think there's some questions around the contract language in general. So, okay.
Right. I'll let section 2.8.
Yeah.
That language in that one. And okay, I can do that when, or maybe we can talk about that at your convenience. When you'd like me to come back with that.
Okay, yeah, I can follow up with that. Okay, any other thoughts or questions on this item?
No, thank you, Sean, for being
Yes, thank you,
available.
Sean, and thank you,
Appreciate it.
Joya.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
commissioners. Thank you, Sean and Christian.
Yes, thank you all very much. We appreciate the support.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Sean.
Joya.
Okay, let's see. So it looks like we are at item I-8, which is discussion and update regarding a grant agreement between Yamhill County and Yamhill Community Action Partnership Board Order 23-414. Is there anything that we would like to discuss publicly at this time?
I have nothing.
I have comments on the other one, but. Okay. So we will move on past that item. Item 9 is consideration of approval of agreement number 44300-000260028 between Yamhill County and the Oregon Health Authority for the financing of community mental health, addiction treatment, recovery and prevention, and problem gambling services in the amount of $7,015,193.53, retroactive to January 1st of 2024 through June 30th of 2025.
Chair, I would move approval.
Okay, and this is basically the base amount of funding for all of these services that we
Correct.
provide through HHS. Any further comments, questions?
So, just comments. So, before Director Manfred left, I did have questions on this, but I asked her so she could
Okay.
go on with her day. It's regarding, page 19 of the agreement. And basically, it's each report shall provide the following information, and it lists off 7 different reports. And I asked her if those reports are available to us without having to be like putting in tens of hours to redact them or whatever. And so she's going to look into that.
Okay.
Just is more of an informational thing for me as we proceed with these contracts and amendments. I just want to know how successful these programs are, how many people are engaging with them, and just it's more for me internally.
And I think there's information where they talk about the number of individuals in different categories that are, some of them are prescribed. In other words, 20% or 80%, variety of different classifications. So there is that, but I don't think that gets you where you want in terms of engagement,
Yep.
utilization,
Yep.
and then outcomes if we can do that.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly. Yep. So that's all I had.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I think I made a motion. If not, I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Item 10 is discussion of Yamhill Community Action Partnerships, YCAP's board membership invitation, and this was added by Commissioner Johnston. So if you
Well, whatever. I mean, I put all the emails in there, the communications that YCAP had with me. They requested for me to fill the open position on their board. I honestly don't know if this is appropriate to discuss right now. So,
I think that that it needs to be stated that YCAP has engaged legal counsel. And so we will be communicating with them now through our counsel. That is not a choice that we made. It was made for us. And I want to speak to John George's comment that trust has deteriorated. And I believe he was making that comment specifically to her about Commissioner Sterrett. And it caught my attention because the feeling is that trust has deteriorated and that the tone coming out of YCAP has significantly deteriorated over the past 5 years. I don't know why that is. I was on the board 5 years ago and it was not like this. So, that was it. That was a very interesting comment. And I don't know that I disagree. There is definitely a loss of trust and trust has deteriorated. And just the attitude, I think, from that organization to governing bodies, this is something that is being reported to us when Commissioner Sterrett was removed from the board from 2 different cities. We have felt it. I don't understand it. And frankly, it's not very rational when the bulk of your funding comes from taxpayers. Reaching out to you directly, in my view, is disrespectful of this board, especially when the acknowledgement was given that they know what our process is, but they're asking you anyway. It's disrespectful of this board. It's disrespectful of the role that the county plays in the broader work that YCAP does and the work that we do. And I have no doubt, Commissioner Johnston, that you would be fantastic. You're fantastic at everything you do. But I personally believe that the liaison to YCAP needs to be the HHS commissioner liaison, because there is so much crossover in work and grants and all of the things that we do, all the services we provide, that it doesn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense for me as the public safety liaison to go sit on YCAP's board. So in my mind, you never should have been removed in the first place. And I do think it's concerning that you were asked to serve, and yet we can't seem to get an answer as to whether or not that's a requirement for them. One would assume it is, because why else would you ask? It's not rational at this point to do that. So I'm going to make the assumption that they must have a county commissioner per their bylaws. And if that's the case, then I would like to nominate Commissioner Sterrett to be on the YCAP board. That is a decision that this board makes, not YCAP. And it doesn't make any sense to have anyone else other than the HHS liaison to serve on the YCAP board.
Which, if that's the case, then nothing changes because that's how it is now. And there is no nomination that needs to be made. Right?
Then I renominate her.
Okay. Yep.
And if they choose to reject the nomination or reject our decision, or then they're
I mean, there's
presumably out of compliance.
so much more that goes into this beyond just the nomination, but that is like step number 1. Step number 2 is, do I have the bandwidth to even do it? I mean, I know what I'm putting in for time for this position, and it's above and beyond. And that's not me tooting my own horn. That is just legit, and you can verify that. I'm out in public. I mean, I see
We have no doubt.
Mike Morris in the morning at 7 a.m. and I see him at 10 p.m. at night. So, you know, it's something that I need, even if, you know, you were willing to transfer the duties to me, there's still something internally that I need to decide whether I even want to do it or not. Not to mention the conflict that seems to be brewing here. It would be a whole nother issue that would, you know, keep me from making a decision on that or not. So to me, everything is just the same right now, because liaison duties are still with Commissioner Sterrett. But if you want to make a motion to reappoint, I'll second that.
I would like to, yeah, I made a motion. I'd like to vote on it. And I would like our county council, since we are now communicating through county council, to send our liaison to YCAP and inform the board that this is who we choose.
Yeah, I was going to ask if the board would like us to first try to follow up with YCAP to get answers to. I was trying to take notes as you were speaking. Sounds like there's a specific question that the board has as to whether or not it is a requirement under YCAP's bylaws that there be a county commissioner sitting on the board. We can certainly reach out and ask that question. I don't think that precludes you from also voting to reappoint Commissioner Starrett at this time if you wanted to do that as well. But would you like us to see if we can get some additional clarification and information on that particular question?
Yes, but I would also send on the responsive nomination.
Sure. Did you have any other specific questions that you'd also like to include in that communication?
Yes, I just would like to address YCAP Vice Chair John George when he talked about trust, that the trust was broken. Can they be more specific as to what I did that was untrustworthy in inviting elected officials to a shelter tour, which was attended by media and board members? It was something that was already scheduled, and also my concerns about what was going on during the inclement weather. So if I could get some clarification on how I, as a board member, was untrustworthy, I would appreciate that. And I also have another question of council as to whether or not I need to recuse myself or whether or not I can vote on this motion.
You voted on the original appointment. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to also participate in this vote. It's the commissioners vote on their liaison duties, and there are, approximately 1/3 of each of those duties assigned to each of the commissioners at the time you vote on it. So I don't necessarily see that as a concern.
I see a hand raised, but we're not taking public comment on this item right now.
That's
so.
up to the board.
Okay, well, there's a motion on the floor. It sounds like you're certainly free to abstain or vote. I'll vote according to Kristen. So. Okay, so I will restate the motion. The motion is to appoint Commissioner Starrett to serve as the YCAP liaison, which means serve on their board of directors. Any further discussion?
None.
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great. Thank you. Motion passes. And Christian, if that could be sort of packaged together by your office and sent over, that would be appreciated.
Yep, certainly.
Okay.
Can we take a 5-minute, 2-minute, 3-minute break?
I want to double check that did we get through most of the other business
I have one add-on before we,
get into the work session?
yes.
Okay.
If we can.
And then we'll take a break.
Okay.
It should be pretty quick. So, our new McMinnville Fire District Chief has reached out to me. I went to one of their meetings on Thursday, and he was talking to me about our radio system and what we're going to end up having to do over the years. And so I just wanted to bring it before the board to make sure I don't end up stepping on the chair's toes, because this is going to overlap with liaison duties for the sheriff's department. So I just want to bring it for you if you guys are okay with me engaging with the fire department, and then overlap would be probably working with Elliot and trying to start piecing together. I have no idea what it looks like yet, but what this new radio system is going to end up looking like, and if we can start putting the pieces together. And
And he's talking about crossover between county and
yep,
fire district.
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with it.
Okay,
No.
And I can reach out to sheriff and just say, hey, Kit's gonna take point
okay, cool.
on this. And
That's it.
okay, so we will take 5 minutes and be back for our work session.
Hey, Christian, do you need me here?
Okay, so we are back. Looks like we made it through all of our agenda and we're gonna hop back over to our work session finally. The work session today is review and discussion of Commissioner Good Governance Policies and Ordinance 900 review. Does everyone have Ordinance 900 in front of them?
Yes.
Okay.
And just to clarify, so there's no confusion, I know Jody's still coming back, but I don't want to get scolded, but we did codify our code, so it's not technically ordinance 900, it's chapter 2.05 of the Yamhill County Code.
Okay, chapter 2.05. Okay, so this governs procedures for conduct of board meetings, transaction of county business, and kind of the board isn't as a whole and also individually what we can't do and what we should do. Originally, I was thinking this work session would be around adding some good governance policies, but I think beyond that, we probably should take a look at this chapter 2.05 in its entirety, because there's some things that are outdated and some things that we need to decide if we should change or update. So I can just, I went through the whole thing. I don't know if you want me to just start to go through. So section 1, I didn't see any changes that need to be made. And Ken, if you see something, jump in. I didn't see any changes from what we do currently. Section 2 seems to be fine. Section 3 seems to be fine until we get down to 2.05, which is informal sessions generally. We don't have informal sessions anymore. So if we need to combine language or cancel that language, strike the language.
And if I'm reading that right too, it's like you physically have to be there. Otherwise your vote doesn't count.
No, but there's an addition for electronic or telephonic participation.
Yeah, but that was only for, it was very specific. Commissioner may participate by electronic.
We are missing both of our county councils. So I think if there's no expectation that we're going to go back to informals, which it sounds like there isn't, because we do have our own one-on-one commissioner meetings with Ken and Christian.
And just to clarify, there's no provisions on voting at an informal session because there's no votes taking at the informal sessions. I know we haven't done it in quite some time, but they were truly an informal session that everything was by consensus on setting the agenda. And then all formal actions were reserved for the formal session on Thursday.
Okay. Oh, so this one is only for informal sessions.
Yeah.
Got it. Because I was reading through, I'm like, so you need to be approved to be basically on Zoom, but then you only approve to vote on the question only. And I'm like, what in the?
Yeah, so we do need
So I
to,
can't Zoom in from Hawaii anymore.
No, you've always been able to, even under the current policy.
Okay.
but you have to have permission.
Briefings. receive
Somebody got it,
reports,
at least.
and consultation.
Okay, so
I got it.
Mrs. Assistant County Counsel, we do need updates to 2.05.0305, which is informal sessions generally.
It's on ordinance
And-
900. Do you have that? in front of
And
you?
if there's,
Sorry.
I was like, where did Jody go? What we could do is based on the feedback, if there's consensus to make that change, what we would need to do is make sure that there's not anything covered under informal session as far as what the sessions were reserved for, because, and move those into the formal session. So if there's something related to, as an example, briefings, receipt of reports, consultation, staff, you know, we do a lot of those things like the department reports. Like when we get the department head reports that come forward as part of the agenda.
Yeah.
That is something historically was reserved for the informal session,
Okay.
not for the formal session. And because we've always titled today's session's a combined informal, formal, you know, that's where we can do some cleanup language to make sure any item that was reserved for informal is moved into the.
So
formal session.
are we proposing to pick one, well, obviously be formal and just have everything funnel through formal session then? So you would no longer have formal/informal and you would get rid of informal off of this.
Correct.
And we strictly would be formal.
That's what I heard.
So, and I would also recommend, it seems very confusing to the general public when we talk about a formal session. If we could call it a board session instead of formal, because it's like, what does that mean? It would be sort of by definition, a board of commissioners meeting session.
Public
whatever.
meeting.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there could always work on the language, but I'm always wanting to be careful because keep in mind that at any point, the board could call a special work session, an executive session, a special formal session. You know, there's other, and I get it. I just want to be careful on whatever we select, that it clearly delineates, or whatever the board would like updated to the language, it clearly delineates the different meetings. So when we're doing the public noticing, it doesn't create any confusion about, well, is this a special work session? Is this an executive session? Is it open to the public? Is it a public hearing? You know, just knowing that we have a lot of those different meetings that may come up throughout the year.
I don't know anybody else who calls it formal, you know, in all of the counties. I don't know that I've run across that, and I think it's a little confusing. I don't know what else we would call it, but formal is like, is that
Public session?
public session?
I think there are some counties that still do informal, but it's becoming more and more rare.
Well, either way, even if we keep it, it still needs to be fixed
Mhm.
on the telephonic participation.
Because you can, well, we don't have informal, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That was a fairly recent addition. when we added the
Really?
telephonic.
It seems like it's been in there from the very
10,
creation of
7,
Yamhill
8
County.
years ago, maybe.
Actually, that was adopted, you're right, it was a
1981.
recent, I want to say it was 2000, it might have been when ordinance 19, the code formally.
No,
No.
Ordinance 900, I believe it was right around that time where that was added.
So are we talking about taking out informal session from subsection B?
I just think it's confusing if we're not going to do them anymore.
It
So
just says may elect to participate by electronic or telephonic means.
I mean, if there's going to be one session, you know, I think the formal, informal was to address the distinction between those two sessions. So as long as we're picking something, weekly business meeting, weekly board session, or something along those lines, we can take a look at that.
consensus to eliminate informals.
So you want to eliminate informal altogether?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
No, you said informal.
Informals, yeah.
Oh, okay. So are we talking about removing informal from the telephonic
Do we get a
participation or we?
parachute with that? Because that's pretty much we all retire and we're out of here, so.
So we're going to keep formal sessions. We're going to discontinue informal sessions. And then for the telephonic, I think we need to update the language to probably reflect the statutory language around
Okay, so we're talking about
remote
removing,
participation.
Page
Mhm.
3.
Although that's public
2.05.
facing, I guess it's really up to the board. You want to have the ability without some type of formal act, because again, that's up to the board. I think with this type of process, and I'm looking at Christian, if you want to, or Jody want to weigh in, but the board could limit if you chose to that, well, if we're having session, we want all the commissioners here. You know, that's up to you.
No, I'm not proposing that. at all.
Right. And because I think that was possibly some of the original intent behind some of the language could be that, well, we're scheduled to be here. We want to
Simple
make sure everyone's here,
Everyone.
you know, to
I feel
deliberate.
another
and vote.
trophy being made right
So-
now, and it's not in my favor.
No.
Okay,
I'm not advocating one way or another. I'm just trying to describe just some of the intent that could have gone into this that,
so you can always move to do anything essentially, outside the perspective of this,
Right.
code. So if you wanted to, if you had one day where you wanted everyone to be there in person, you could just do that case by case.
Okay.
But if you want, I can put something like at the discretion of the board at the front end of it, but that puts a limitation on it outright.
That was prior to us actually codifying it. It was at the discretion of the board and there used to be
Oh.
a vote prior. If somebody was
Now it's
stuck
gonna
on
be the opposite now.
I think we should leave it the way it is. And if you can't be here, I don't know anybody on this current board that we have to worry about not showing up.
Can I clarify what we are talking about, which piece?
So I'm,
it's the telephonic participation, 205-0309.
It is under informal though, which we.
so I would
agreed
remove
we're
that.
Axing it anyway.
Yeah, it's under,
It's
I would leave it in, but I'd take out the part that
order.
says
It's a
in
separate
informal
section.
session.
It is a
That
separate-
doesn't just apply to informal.
Yeah.
That
Right.
applies to all the sessions listed
Oh.
above there.
Okay.
So that.
Yeah, because the board has allowed commissioners to participate by telephone for years, but I believe Mary's correct that if a commissioner wanted to do it, it was basically up to the rest of the board to say, yes, it's okay for you to appear by telephone. And now in, you know,
All right.
in our modern days, it's appearing virtually as well.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
so I want to make sure I got this. So the only thing we're doing to the telephonic section is just to remove any reference to informal sessions.
No,
mm-mm.
Okay.
under C must be
You're right.
physically
Subsection
present.
B is confusing in there.
Right.
What do you want to do to subsection C?
Because if you go up further in, they talk about formal, so quorum required, formal session schedule, formal business, and then you sort of get into informal sessions.
D must be physically present to participate in the formal, so that would have to go away.
Mhm.
So what we'll do is we'll stop deciphering between informal, formal. I'll go through it all and unless it's specific to informal. I guess I should say if it's specific to formal, any references to informal will be removed and it'll just be a default session.
Well, it says an absent commissioner may not participate in the formal session.
It'll just say session. If that's what I'm understanding, if you're trying to get rid of the distinction between informal and formal, and I'm just talking like construction of sentence. I'm not like, what you want to do is up to you, but, although an absent commissioner may not participate in the session, the absent commissioner may listen.
No.
Can we take a step back and do one at a time? Because now I'm getting confused as to what we're on. So 2.050305, that just needs to go away completely.
Yep.
Okay.
And I presume 6 too.
6 needs to go away.
Okay.
7B needs to go away. Public notice of board meetings.
Yep.
8's fine. 9B, a commissioner may elect to participate in a session by electronic or telephonic means, right? C, except as provided in subsection D below, a commissioner must be physically present at the meeting in order to participate in the formal session of the board.
There's no more formal.
I think I would want to strike that completely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think we just get rid of C altogether.
Get rid of C altogether.
And then D is a commissioner may participate by electronic or telephonic means upon the concurrence of a majority of the board. I would just say a commissioner may participate by electronic or telephonic means. in any session. We don't need to concur or vote that somebody can zoom in.
2-1, Commissioner Johnston.
Okay. I
That's
think I'm
what I
tracking.
wanted.
I'm tracking. This will all obviously come back in front of you
Yeah.
guys.
It better not. Get it done.
It's not gonna come back
Signature.
in front of you.
Next time I see this, I have like
Um,
one of them little colorful
be
sign
here
things from Carolina that says
in
sign
3
here.
months. 3 months and 3 years.
Okay, so that, I think that just kind of wraps that up and makes it simpler. Going down to agendas. Section 1, agenda schedule, except when the presiding officer or a majority of the board determines that good cause exists for a different time. The agenda for a formal session of the board shall be set at the 2 p.m. informal session on the Tuesday preceding the formal session. So we need to get rid of that last piece, but when do we typically have a cutoff?
So that was modified, and I don't have the board order in front of me, but those procedures were changed by the board when we stopped doing informal sessions in 2020 with COVID. I'd have to dig up the actual board order. But at this point, the process has changed because we don't do informal, so the board wouldn't meet and set the agenda for Thursday. And that authority was delegated to staff and to me to build the agenda and put together, and post the agenda based on everything that was submitted from commissioners and from departments.
Okay, so we've already fixed that. It's just not in
Correct.
here.
Because it says the presiding officer shall determine the order of the agenda.
Oh, you're on the next one. I'm still on the first one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a modified process that we need to update to reflect that if
Okay.
the board's okay, because at this point, we have a process where items are submitted. I work with staff, we build the agenda, and then we post the agenda, but then the board has the ability, individual commissioners can add items, and then the board can always, when you open up the agenda that morning, modify, just like we did today, take things out of order, make some adjustments. You have that, set things over for another week. So
Okay. So we'll get that plugged in there.
Are you gonna give me direction on what you want?
I will.
And then number 2, any member of the board may place an item on an agenda for any meeting, period. Just need to get rid of the rest of that. Item 3, consent agenda, just need to strike the at the informal session language. And then I think everything looks consistent with what we do. Until we get to section 7, appointment of committees, boards, and commissions. I highlighted this part because we've had these questions before. Under number 3, appointment term. Unless by the bylaws of an advisory committee, board, task force, or commission provide to the contrary, a member shall continue to serve in office following expiration of their term until a successor has been appointed. So we've had that situation where people's, like a Parks Board member, whatever, their term expires. This tells us they can continue to serve until, and their
Planning
votes would
Commission had
count,
that.
right? Planning Commission, the votes would count.
This is another one that I would highlight, that there was another board order that the board took action on that was a separate policy that also addressed appointment and vacancies to the board. I'd be happy to share that with the board, because you can take a look at that and maybe it's an amendment to this to incorporate that language. We can make one of the orders go away or just treat it under that section.
Okay.
I can get that information for the board.
Okay.
It goes into a lot more specifics as far as even managing and facilitating the boards and some more detail, and then the appointment process, advertising, all those things. So it's up to you. You can take a look at that and compare it to this section and see if there's edits that need to be made to this section, or if the other board order will suffice with addressing that. So.
Okay.
And would we have to change shall to may? Because we don't necessarily, we are not going to necessarily say that a member basically will continue to serve in that capacity. It's that they could. So there's the may and the shall, or is that addressed in the?
It might be addressed in
Okay,
whatever.
Where are you looking? Just so I have it
Oh.
flagged.
2050703.
right. That doesn't.
Oh, a member shall continue? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll flag it.
Okay. And then operations of the board
Have
office.
a red pin.
I'm lucky to have this one.
2050802, the county administrator and county council shall be under the principal direction of the chair, subject to approval and direction of the majority of the board. I don't know if this is relevant or if that's really how we operate. That might need to be updated. Unless it needs to be there, I don't know, but
It's up to
It means
Christian.
more in terms of the liaison duty, but not necessarily in terms of.
You just want to change it to the board? What are you thinking?
well, it just seems odd that to me, that means that, Commissioner Johnston or Sterrett can't ask county council or county administrator to do anything, right? That you're not under their direction, which is sort of awkward. I don't know.
I mean, I get that. I get that interpretation. I think perhaps what it might have originally been intended to address was a situation where the chair might have instructed the county administrator or county council to do something that the other two members of the board might disagree with. They could then weigh in and by board action, change that direction. But I do also agree that the board, we sort of, Ken and I both have sort of reported to the chair. But I would agree. I think we take direction from the majority of the board.
Right. Right.
Well, it says principal direction, not complete or total.
Yeah, there's that too.
And I don't, if there's no reason for that to read like that, modify it to say
I think just
the
for
majority of the board.
transparency issues alone, it would be just the board.
Well, majority, because if we have differing
Oh,
views,
there you go. Yep.
so,
Super
Mhm.
technical, that's fine. That's up to her to get super technical.
yeah, majority of the
I
board.
get to spitball, right?
All right. Did anybody see anything else on? I have the stuff that I would like to see added, but anything else on what exists here? All of it. So I talked to Ken and Christian about the issue with public comment. So when people submit public comment, and if they're submitting it the morning of the board formal session, it's very difficult, if not impossible, for Carolina to post that on the website and make it available to either the news media or anybody else that wants to see it. And we've had some complaints about, oh, hey, I don't see my public comment on there, or folks from News Register saying, hey, I don't know what you're talking about because I can't see it. So I think it would be wise for us to set a policy, kind of like, cities do, school boards, where we have maybe a 5 p.m. cutoff on the day prior to the BOC meeting for acceptance of public comment to be posted in its
Written.
entirety.
I'd clarify written public comment probably.
Written, sorry, yes. Written public comment, So cut off at 5 p.m. day prior to BOC, that gives Carolina some time in the morning to just pop that up there. It's there for public viewing. And then anything that we receive after 5 p.m. would go and be posted onto the following week.
And you said it was the night before the session? Or the
5
board- okay.
p.m.
Does
5
that,
p.m. before.
So Wednesdays at 5?
does that give
Okay.
Carolina enough time in the morning to, in addition to everything else?
It's
Yeah.
more time than what we have now because we basically accept written public comment all the way up to
Yeah.
and during the meeting. So,
But to post,
yeah,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
think we can do that.
Well,
Okay.
actually, that doesn't sound fair because 5 o'clock, you need to
She's
be like an
gone.
hour before or like 3
She's gone.
p.m. or something like that.
yeah, that's what I was thinking, 3 p.m. because 5
That's why it
o'clock,
gives
you're
them a
not
chance
even
to
here.
get that. The whole purpose of it is to get it done the day before, so you're not scrambling the morning up to try to.
Exactly.
So
By 10 a.m.
Mhm.
the day up.
Mhm.
Yeah, because that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally it would be posted by 8 a.m. on the day of our formal session, right? So you have people have time to read it if they want to. So I'm open if you want to do 3
3
p.m. Some
3
people do
o'clock.
noon.
So you're talking about two different times. One is the submission time by 3 or 4 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, and then posted by 8 a.m. Thursday.
You want to dictate the posting time?
But then 8 o'clock is when you show up to work and you're supposed to have all that.
That's what I'm worried
Yeah.
about.
What we could do is because, thank you, Jody, for reminding me that this is an ordinance. That'll be, that all the revisions will have to go through,
Yeah.
an extended process. Hearing that feedback, what I'd like to do is take a step back. If the board's okay with setting a deadline, like the day before the session on any public comment that we'll upload for that meeting and have posted and available. I also have to figure out the kind of working backwards from there on when we post the final agenda, which we typically do on Wednesdays by 10 a.m. I'm trying to work backwards and any
Mm.
add-on items that make, that's the hard part because I want to make sure that we're affording people an opportunity to see what's on the agenda and being able to make comment. And if we're posting a final agenda that may have had a revised item or an addition to it, and we're giving them 3 hours to respond to it, now they could still come to session, or virtually or in person and provide their comment. But for those who wish to give, I'm, if that makes sense, I'm trying to
It
work
does.
backwards on some of that process. Because I can describe, as far as our internal process goes, we have a deadline at Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock for department heads to get agenda items to us. And so we can upload the packet on the website and start building the draft agenda. It never fails. Monday, we'll usually get some revisions or some additional items and we'll make some further modifications. But by the time we get to Wednesday is when we're posting the finalized agenda. So I just want to make sure, because number one, I can remind departments and speak to county council and everyone else and making sure that we're adhering to those timeline constraints to make sure we have stuff in the packet. So that way, if we put a deadline, that staff's not being criticized, that we're posting things and people don't have sufficient time to provide comment to the board before you take action on something that next day. So hopefully that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, I don't think there's a perfect solution, but maybe it is just public comment by 5 p.m. Wednesday.
Right.
And then the packet, whatever we've received up until 5, is posted by the time we start at 10 o'clock, right? So, yeah,
And then typically anything we would receive at session, it takes us a little bit longer,
Right.
but we'll usually upload that.
yeah, we're not waiting until next week. We're
Correct.
kind of uploading
Right.
as we go. So,
Okay.
How does that sound?
I think we have
So
to ask
final, sorry.
Carolina. That's
Do we
doable.
intend to post
we'll figure it out.
Okay, so 5 PM the night before session? Is that what
Yeah,
we
so
landed?
our
Okay,
finalized agendas are 10 a.m. on Wednesday. And then written comments specifically by 5 p.m. Wednesday. And then posted, what we have in written comment is posted by the time the BOC formal session starts.
okay,
And then anything received after 5 p.m. goes into the next week's batch.
okay. Okay, that makes sense.
The other question that we talked about was reading something into the record. We receive sometimes a request to read written comment into the record. I don't have a problem doing that. I think it just needs to be up to the discretion of, the board. Maybe it's the chair, right? If you get a bunch of emails and they're all asking you to read this into the record, maybe it just is a chair thing where the request is made.
Historically, that's always been at the discretion. We get a lot of requests, we get a lot of questions. It's an opportunity to provide public comment. I think it's completely up to the discretion of the board. I would probably say it'd probably be good if there's reluctance on reading everything that comes in, I don't know if I would recommend putting it in the policy. I think you already have the latitude to make those decisions as individual commissioners or as a board that, I feel this is important. I'd like to read it into the record, or no, we read it just fine. We don't need to read it in. You have that decision-making ability right now.
Okay. The second point was to codify making virtual participation and attendance available. It sounds like we already have that for commissioners. But do we have it for public?
We're required
Testimony.
by statute to provide an alternative means,
So that's already been updated. Okay.
but I don't know if it's captured in here. I don't know if we need to. We have
Be
several
redundant, but,
different ways that we do it, so.
it depends. If you want to sort of be specific about how you're going to do it, you can put it in here. If you just want to go with what's in statute, you can just leave it blank. Or just let statute run that, dictate that, I guess. That's up to you though. You just have, if you're going to put an ordinance, then the only reason that I can think of is if you wanted to be more specific. Otherwise, just let the state law rule.
Or if you want to define procedures on someone who's participating remotely, how they can participate.
So
you know,
any
other
limitation.
jurisdictions require that you fill out,
Request
a request to provide public comment or join remotely. I've seen it all over
Yeah.
the map.
Yeah.
Instead of going through the hand raising and where you have someone, so then it helps staff that because sometimes if, some people put their first name and last name, but sometimes they don't. And we struggle in making sure that that's reflected in the record who gave comment. And if they're using some handle or something. Right,
And it's easy to miss hands that are raised. If
Right.
that's what we're relying on for someone to show they want to make public comment, it's very easy to miss that on Zoom.
But anything around public comments, because, because there's not really a requirement that you afford public comment. And so that's something that if, that's why you have some more latitude if you want to define some procedures and some other things within this contract that, or contract, within the code, you can do that.
For you.
Further refine the policies and procedures. And again, sometimes it's not necessarily to address current issues. We're also trying to forecast potential issues down the road or.
Yeah, I think Washington County enacted something because they were having some issues with individuals trying to provide inappropriate comments during session. I can go look and see what they have and provide that as an example if you want.
Yeah, I think their Zoom account or something, it was got hacked. I don't know if
I
that
think
was
they were,
Washington County,
maybe it wasn't Washington County.
but I know what you're talking about. They might have been City of Beaverton.
Could have been. Yes, that sounds right, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were saying inappropriate things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of work for Carolina to have to manage
Mhm.
however those come in. Would it be easier if, if somebody raises their hand and I call on them, if I say, you have to state your name and address and spell your name for us? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, there could be easier ways to sort of,
Yeah,
manage
unfortunately, I
that?
think sometimes once you unmute or give the permission to talk, sometimes the damage can already be done. If it's something malicious
Oh,
that's
yeah,
happening,
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what happened is they
Yeah.
were,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we'll take a look
Pretty
at it
vulgar.
and,
Okay.
and we might have some best practices or maybe some suggestions. So I think we should be prepared and learn from some of those
Yeah.
lessons that other jurisdictions have been dealing with.
Okay.
I'll try to find the least onerous option.
Put 7-second delay and we'll be fine.
Mhm.
And have somebody have a kill button ready to go.
Okay. So before we jump into the good governance proposal, is there anything else on, public comment or how we manage some of that?
Can
I would love to have a tracking system, like some cities have public comment tracking systems where they
Oh.
track the issue and what, the questions that have been asked
yeah.
and the
McMichael does
follow-up,
that.
and that's pretty sweet, but I think we do a pretty good job of keeping track and divvying between commissioner
Sounds like a
liaison.
job for the comms director.
Can I ask for a request to addition, I guess it would be, that I actually, it's on my little to-do list, is I was hoping I could add a section to the,
Where's that deny stamp?
we're not there yet.
Oh, okay.
I haven't
No,
written that
no.
part yet. Under section 7, I was just hoping we could put something in there about bylaws so that
About
we could
what?
make committee bylaws more transparent. I did not run this past Ken first. So section 7 is appointment of committee boards and
Yeah,
commissions.
I again would say maybe we sit down and we'll go through that other, because I think it does cover,
Does it already cover that?
it may. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
remember off the top of my head, but
Yeah,
Mm,
it would be good to have like one place for all bylaws.
Yeah.
Because that,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
A clearinghouse for bylaws. Okay, so the good governance proposal, if you will, is basically what I would love to see is a report that's produced during our budget meetings every year in April/May. So when we get to that place in the binder where it says commissioners, that one of the front pages would be this report. And the first part of it would be regarding our discretionary allocation. So we receive $1,500 every fiscal year per commissioner, that we can use for a variety of different things. I don't even know if there's any restrictions on those. I don't have that policy in front of me, but if there's no policy, then I guess we're creating one maybe, but put some sideboards on that in terms of the use of the funds. So Commissioner Sarah, you've talked about this before, that your funds have been accumulating because
Well,
you,
Well, I had asked
wow.
I feel a good story coming from.
yeah, just
They
to,
don't accumulate.
I mean,
have you been dipping into my discretionary?
Oh.
no, I would just highlight that everything, because this is in fund, the commissioner's budget, which is in fund 1013. And it's a line in the budget, and it's just like anything else. If it's not spent during the fiscal year, it goes into the beginning balance and carries forward. We don't necessarily track or build funds within the fund to save. I just,
so it's there. So if Commissioner Starrett hasn't spent any of her discretionary in 10 years, there should be $15,000 sitting in the beginning balance.
Not specifically to that, it would be rolled up with any other cost savings that would be there, unless there was some arrangement or discussion with the board or doing something, because it's not really. It's how it's set up is you have $1,500 a year to spend on different things. You're not given $1,500 to, and of course that's subject if the board wants to change that practice. I'm just, it's part of the total resources within that fund. And so it comes in. And so we don't, well, if it's unspent, it goes into a restricted reserve or goes into some other reserve, or we're tracking or doing anything like that.
It used to be, the original intent was when you had something within your area of liaison that
Right.
wasn't funded, that you could use, and I think it was more significant than that, maybe it was 5,000 or 2,500, that you could actually backfill something in your departments that needed some help. So then that got changed to the $1,500 a year.
Mhm.
And I had asked previous boards if we could put some restrictions on that, because there, believe me, were no restrictions, and that was of concern. So then I didn't spend it, and then I think I took a lump sum and gave it to Homeward Bound.
Mhm.
But every time I asked for it, I was like, okay, here you go, here's your money, but don't get used to asking for it. But basically, you're right, it's not getting piled up.
Right. It's not a bank account.
It's not a bank account.
It's an authorization to really look at it, because the budget document is that it's an authorization to spend money during the fiscal year. So the board could come in during the budget process, and you look at Fund 1013 in particular. The board could say, you know what, for this year, I have this, I would like to see the amount increased. I'd like to see that line increase to $15,000 because I have this item, the chair has this item, commissioner has this item, and you could adopt a budget to do that, to say, you know what, we're going to take it. We see we have ending balance, we have funds available. I'd like to have 15,000 available for the year. Or if just one commissioner wants to come forward and say, you know what, I have a specific thing that isn't within one of the other departments, and I would like to see this line increase, because if there's consensus from the board, I'd like to give $10,000 to George Fox. I'm just throwing out an example. So you have that flexibility within the budget, and I know it gets kind of confusing because, but we don't necessarily track it to that detail, that if it's unspent in this line, it goes back into this line and it continues to accumulate. Because some commissioners never use those funds. Other commissioners may only use a portion of that. I'm thinking the fair is a good example. I think that was one where we've seen contributions, or a COG event, purchasing a table at a COG dinner, or doing some of those other things. That's the intent of these funds being available. There are some restrictions, because again, they're county funds, and we have to make sure that they're, what they're being spent on is consistent with, our fiscal responsibilities. Yeah.
Well, I guess my further restrictions that I would like to see lend themselves to making it an annual allocation, and it doesn't accumulate.
Okay.
Basically, unless you don't want that, and then we can adjust, but
Doesn't accumulate, so
right.
spend it or it goes away. Kind of like.
But it doesn't go up.
It doesn't go away.
Strives for in his budget.
Is that we don't spend it.
Right. That's like.
I'm
we don't
neutral
want-
on the accumulation of funds. I'm neutral on that. I just want some more transparency about how they're spent, and some restrictions on how they're spent.
Well, that's what I had asked for, because I think there were some, at least I thought the funds were used for things that I don't think should have been used for. But again, everybody had their own philosophy and ideology about how to do it, but there was no appetite in previous boards to put restrictions on it. And I always thought that we should.
And I think historically, my understanding of why these funds were set up is it allowed individual commissioners to be able to freely access some funds to do a donation to 4-H or to do
Type of
something
projects.
along without necessarily having to come back and discuss with the full board. I would like to, so it was intended to give individual commissioners some funds to be able to do these small things.
Right.
Without having to necessarily come back before the board. You could easily adopt a policy and says, or it could be included as part of this, or it could just be in agreement. I don't know if it needs to be a full-fledged policy or something. To say, you know what, before you spend any funds out of your annual allocation, come back and talk to the
Tell us
rest
what
of
you're
the
gonna
board.
do.
Yeah.
Not
good
saying
idea.
no, but you need to tell us what you're doing.
And that's completely, the board could self-impose that on yourselves. That's,
Well, I don't want to have to do that every time. That's the point of this annual report. So that there is transparency around
Mhm.
where the money went. And then it's kind of self-policing, right?
Yeah. That would take care of it.
if there's a wish to see that, if there's any expenditures, I
Mhm.
can, half the time I could just pull it right there at the budget committee meeting.
Yeah.
Or at any time, if you wanted an update, I could look at the spending activity in those accounts.
That should be public facing and also the expense reports.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay.
So it sounds like there's consensus that we need to just continue to manage the discretionary funds the way that we have been, where if they're not used, they just roll forward into whatever beginning balance or ending balance or the ending that becomes the beginning.
But the admin budget or the general fund, where does that?
No, it stays, it's just like any other department, any unspent funds that occur within that budget will stay in that budget.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And it just is rolled forward to the next year to help cover any operational costs.
Which is why the commissioner's budget has been really healthy lately
Mhm.
in terms of expenses and all those discretionary funds.
Okay. I don't want to put too much restrictions on it, but I think there's some obvious ones like no political contributions. That does not seem like an appropriate use of county taxpayer dollars. So no political
I
contributions.
don't think we can do.
That'd be illegal. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
illegal. Okay,
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to be said, I guess. I said no personal expenditures.
I vote.
And when I say no personal expenditures, it's not, I don't want to have a commissioner treat it like petty cash or something. Like it needs to be, it can be a ticket to a county event for that individual where you're participating as a commissioner in your official role. But I do think that there needs to be a pretty clear line that there's no personal expenditures allowed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's, yeah, that would be.
So would you want to allow a commissioner to host a lunch that they also attended where you had other community leaders in attendance to talk about a specific issue? Would that be too personal?
That'd be expense.
If
Sorry.
they were also attending and eating?
Under an
Yeah,
under
I think
expense
that's
account.
captured through expenditures or reimbursements.
Expense.
Yeah, just keep in mind, because I know it can get confusing. Do you have?
So that you wouldn't want discretionary funds to be for that purpose.
Because just to clarify, because not having the full budget in front of us, so for 1013, the discretionary fund is a set amount of funds. Each
Mhm.
commissioner has $1,500 that they can use for different things, and like I've described before, things like conference registrations, travel, mileage, lunches like Christian described, that's all built into other expense reimbursement lines within that budget.
That doesn't come off the 1,500?
No, it doesn't. But it comes out of the total of what you have budgeted in materials and services for the fiscal year.
But if a commissioner wanted to use discretionary for that purpose,
Or, yeah, for, attending a NACO conference, I guess. I might, theoretically you could, you didn't.
Unless the board said that wasn't an allowed use.
Because that would be a little bit different, like if you wanted to, as a fiscal thing, like if you wanted to set limits, you know, to get more detail, setting limits on travel, conference attendant, you know, some of those other things that, I mean, you could do that as a board. I don't have anything in front of me that I can think of right now, but those are some fiscal decisions, policy decisions that the board can make and set. It's just keep in mind that with the budget, we have general ledger codes where we record specific expenses. And so I make sure that we have monies appropriated to accommodate going to AOC, paying for travel, reimbursing for mileage, being able to, all those things that come into play. Those are different lines, but not specifically tied to that discretionary. That discretionary, that $1,500 is above and beyond just kind of that annual operating budget that we set each year.
But
Right.
there was never any transparency when it came to each individual commissioner's, let's say, expenses, travel, meals, all of that, mileage. It was just sort of muddled. It was not anything that the public could look at and go, wow, one commissioner's been doing a lot of traveling and driving and eating out. So I think that would be the one piece I think we have been missing. Fortunately, nobody here today is doing that, but I think it's a concern going forward.
But just to clarify, I mean, all of those expense reports are a matter of public record, and we have had public records requests come in from folks to see expense reports. But to your, I think maybe the point you're saying is there wasn't ever sort of an effort made by the county to push that information out. Someone would have to have requested it.
Yeah, somebody had to say, can I see X, Y,
Right.
Z? Yeah.
Right, so there's two parts to this sort of report that I would love to have produced at every budget meeting, which is the discretionary, where discretionary went, and then where, you know, where expense and travel reimbursements are at in terms of each commissioner. So I don't want to put a whole lot of restrictions on discretionary other than the obvious ones, no political contributions, no personal expenditures. You can't go buy a cell phone with it, right? So, but I do think it's important to have that be public because like nonprofits, for instance, right? It would be perfectly fine for one of us to give our entire discretionary allocation to like the Grand Sheremina Food Bank, right? But maybe Kit decides that he wants to give his to a nonprofit in Georgia that is doing, you know, housing cats with broken legs. Like that is,
They slaughter pigs and make super delicious bacon, and Mary wouldn't be okay with it.
you know, we would start to question, we would start to question Kit
Yeah.
and his decision making.
Yes.
And why you're sending, you
Custom
know,
bacon.
Yamhill County taxpayer money to Georgia.
Yeah.
So that's the self-policing element that I would like to have there.
So, and you're also global approach to both of these, the $1,500 allocation and then the obviously the larger allocations through just the budget, the admin budget for travel expenses and all that, that can go above and beyond the 1,500. Those are the two that you're,
Yeah, so if we sort of have consensus over building that in with discretionary, I'll move on to the expense travel.
oh, you have two.
Does that sound
Yeah. I
good
totally-
for
totally
discretionary?
reasonable. Yep.
okay? And then, so expense and travel, different counties do different things. I know Washington County has tried to limit travel expenses for their board. So, and I think there was one other one that had where you have to come for board approval if the travel is going to cost more than $1,000. So it has to come forward, the request has to come forward, the board has to vote on it. I don't know if we want to do something like that where it's an individual travel limit amount. So NACO is a good example. NACO in DC is going to cost at least $5,000 for a commissioner to go between airfare, hotel, and everything else. So if we want to do individual limits, or if we want to do a flat limit per commissioner on everything, which is a little harder to track because how do you know if you're exceeding $1,000 until you exceed it? Right?
I think you just have a set limit. So are you going down the road of, your limit's 1,000, but you're gonna come to the board because you're gonna spend 5 and get approval for the 5? Because then now it's between, let's say you want to go to NACO, and then it's down to me and Commissioner Starrett to say, nope, you're not going, or we're only gonna give you 1,000.
Well, we have no limits right now.
Mhm.
So you could be expensing
The full
every
5,000
single
was,
thing that you're doing, mileage, food, on a daily basis, and we would not know because we're not informed of that, and there's no limit. So, there's also no limit on, if you want to go to NACO and take a limousine to your hotel
Right.
room, like
Mhm.
we don't have any restrictions. So I would like to have some limitations on that kind of, those kinds of expenditures.
Man, that's gonna get, I mean, so you're limiting the type of expenditure and the dollar amount. I don't mind limiting the dollar amount, but now you're gonna limit the type of expenditure also? And how do you cover all of that without
Because-
just setting a dollar limit, I guess?
Because setting a dollar limit doesn't necessarily fix the problem. If you have, let's say you have one commissioner who's taking 4 trips to Washington DC. So you're going to exceed that. There might be a legitimate reason to be going back and forth. But then, in other words, I would say that when you have travel that would, that it should come before the board to have a discussion, or at least that limits the lack of transparency to say, I'm scheduled to go to DC next week, and then in a month I have to go back for this NACO meeting. That at least is out there. It's part of the record. Whereas before, it was never part of any record anywhere, other than if somebody asked for a expense account report.
Yes
Yeah.
and no. The other part that I would highlight is I know it probably gets overlooked on our county website, but Mike Barnhart, as part of our statutory requirements, we do post a monthly expense report on our website that includes basically all the checks that we've written for that month. And we post that every single month. And so that's another means that I do want to highlight, that which also includes personnel expense reimbursement as well. That's included because we process those through accounts payable. So it's also included in here.
So those check register thing, that actually gets posted to the website, the one that you'd
Here,
been sending to us?
I can share an example. This
But
is
even with
a little
I mean,
different.
there still needs to be some form of, because even on those, some of them are confusing, like under memo lines, it's like, so what is it?
Yeah,
No.
the public doesn't
No.
know how to
No.
translate.
Well, and it's not really, I mean, our requirements are we're supposed to post the supplier, who we
Right.
paid,
Yeah.
then a basic description and the amount that we paid.
And I'm
So-
not saying we need to go in depth with all those, but if we're talking about this specific and how specific, that's
Right.
probably not.
But if you had something in, a bill to Bob's limousine service, to use one of the examples you cited, that you could raise a question.
Right.
And
But my point is, it wouldn't be on that, because I've seen things on there that are just very vague. That there's no way I would have known it was to go pay for a limo, or it would have said transportation. It wouldn't have said Bob's, well, unless the name of the limo service was Bob's Limo Service.
But I would highlight that if you were to, or if the public had questions or looking at that and they see, as an example, it's public record. So if you saw 3 months of expense reimbursement requests being processed from the county administrator, the request could be submitted and we would produce those records in response to that. And you could take a look and see what I
Exactly.
may have requested
Right.
personnel expense reimbursement for. It's hard to kind of, because I also want to just kind of caveat anything. We can build all kinds of reports, we can post all kinds of stuff, we can do this, but I have to figure out the staff time and what's the administrative portion of it to post these reports or make this information available as well. I get that it's important. I'm also trying to balance with everything else.
Well, what I'm hoping to avoid is a situation where we've got a commissioner nickel and diming the public. So, it would be very easy for me to, or any one of us to say, oh, I can justify this reimbursement and this one and this one and this one. And all of a sudden you have an extra $300 coming in every month that you get used to having come back to you every month. And, now all of a sudden there's a pattern and it's a problem. So, I just I want to put some sideboards on that, and I don't know what the answer is. If we just say that if we're going to do a report at budget meeting that says Commissioner Johnson had $786 in reimbursements for this past year, and Commissioner Sterrett had 0, and Commissioner Bergeron had this. At least it keeps us accountable to each other. And we can explain what those were. Right?
Yeah.
But I do think that having that individual travel limit amount is a wise policy. So anything that you think would exceed $1,000 or whatever it is. So if it's NACO or if it's the Hawaii conference or, whatever, you gotta come to the board for approval and kind of justify why you think that this is a good idea for the county as a whole.
Because it's not raining and it's 80 degrees.
And this may be an obvious thing that is against the law, like we said, with political stuff, but absolutely no alcohol reimbursement and no personal item reimbursement. So I don't know if we have to actually state that in a policy, but
As far as I know, you can, I'm getting a no. So
What's that?
there's nothing in statute that says what you said, so I would put it in policy.
okay.
I think there might already be.
I was going to say, Ken, don't we have a policy around that? We have a number of policies around expenses, but they generally have not been entirely applicable to the board. I mean, if the board were interested in
Overnight.
extending that to cover the commissioners, that might be one way to sort of address some of the concerns that already are, the way in which it's handled for employees.
Okay.
Yeah, because commissioners have pretty much blanket. And it was never, well, this is the employee policy. It didn't apply to commissioners. So there was the opportunity for, overstepping some bounds because nobody was saying no. If you sign off on a commissioner's expense report, you're not looking at it going, oh, should you be doing this? Because nobody wants to do that to a commissioner. But if it's written down, then everybody knows what the rules are. And if you have somebody coming in who wants to take advantage of that, well, they can't do it.
Yeah, and we also have a situation now where we're putting county council in a really awkward spot because he has to approve the reimbursements. And if he's noticing a pattern that may not be a healthy pattern, what's he supposed to say? It's a very awkward position to be in. So this just provides some extra accountability to each other, I think. So does that cover it? I mean, is there consensus about maybe like the individual travel? If you think it's going to exceed something, it has to come to the board.
I'm fine with any restriction because I know what I do
Yeah.
and I hardly even touch it. I know I never claim any travel. Now, whether I should or not, maybe, but that's my choice that I've made. And so I'm okay with restrictions on it.
Yeah, I agree. It's not to keep the honest people honest. It's to keep everybody on the same page.
Or at least create something to where there is no question,
Yeah. Okay. So did we give you enough info to sort of pull something together?
We'll figure it out.
We'll
You-
see.
okay.
I
You
would
know-
recommend we can pull some examples and
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
And in terms of the annual report that goes in the commissioner budget or whatever, when we discuss, I'm not thinking anything complicated, just Commissioner 1, Commissioner 2, Commissioner 3 spent this in discretionary. It went to this entity. And then, had these travel expenses reimbursed for this past fiscal year.
Agreed.
And we discuss if we need to, and if there's a problem, we deal with the problem and then move on.
The report due
So when
when you do the
in
budget
budget
thing.
meetings,
Okay,
when we're going through admin and we get to commissioners,
okay,
it seems like the best way to
okay,
have that be publicly discussed and disclosed. So,
okay. As long as he's tracking all of this, because I don't know anything about the budget process, so.
no, well, I guess you're gonna have to participate.
Ooh, I don't know if you. want to do that.
and then I had another, I don't know if we need to really get into this, but the issue of legal fees and how we are reimbursed for legal fees and how CIS is tied into that. I think that warrants maybe another discussion. It's getting late, but I think we need to look at our policy around that because
There
we've
is a board
seen,
order on that.
yeah, so maybe that's another session, right? And we bring that board order forward and look at that because we have seen what I would call a weaponizing of complaints against commissioners in the past 5 years, and it's very expensive to be in this position and defend not only ourselves in our official role, but the county is in general. So I think we do need to look at, because I don't even know if commissioners are aware what the policy says in terms of reimbursements or
Well,
liability.
There's a couple different things. There's a board order that Christian's more familiar than I am. It depends on the type, because then there's the CIS coverage that covers
Mhm.
more specifically for, well, OGAC.
I think they both generally grew out of sort of expenses related to ethics complaints. I mean, the CIS coverage, there's a specific amount that is available to the county per plan year. And it's up to a fixed amount per claim and then a total. So for example, they'll cover, and I may not have these numbers exactly right, up to $5,000 for a particular claim or $15,000 in the entire plan year. So you could have 3 claims of $5,000 a piece. And then there is no more coverage if in that same year there is a 4th claim. And there's some other reporting requirements and some other other requirements around the reimbursement occurring only if the elected is cleared by OGEC of any wrongdoing. So if you're found to have violated statute or violated an OGEC policy, then the reimbursement from CIS wouldn't apply. And then, as Ken said, there's that separate board order. I can circulate it to the board if you'd like to have a chance to take a look at it, and then we could come back at a later date and in the meantime certainly have individual conversations about questions you have, but maybe set it for a broader discussion.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we have a policy that's equitable and it is current based on the climate that we're in. Because how it is now is that if we have a $15,000 limit by CIS and one commissioner is being targeted, that commissioner could utilize that entire 15,000, max out the limit. And then if the other 2 are targeted or have complaints filed against them, there's no coverage. That is not equitable in my mind. So we need to kind of figure out how we're going to manage that going forward. Like I said, it's not something that is going to get decided today. I just wanted to mention it, that it's been on my mind as sort of this overall, how.
And keep in mind too, that CIS coverage is not specific to commissioners. It's ethics complaints writ large. If we have employees who have an ethics complaint filed against them, or managers, represented or unrepresented employees, if they come to us and want to take advantage of the CIS coverage, they could utilize some or most of that money as well. So it isn't limited to just elected officials. The board order, I believe, well, no, I don't think, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the board order isn't as well.
Just
So-
so you know, Christian, you're really hard to hear. I know you switched to your
I
laptop.
did. I had my headphones died, so I had to switch back to my laptop microphone.
Okay. Okay, well, let's maybe circulate that and like I said, bring it back another time, but something to noodle on for the future. I think we've got some good updates to chapter 2.05 and also, some good governance procedures and policies that can be added for the time being. Anything else to cover in the work session?
No.
Okay. So I think that covers the bulk of county business. I know it's getting late. I had a couple of pretty important announcements, so I'm just going to dive right in. I do want to make sure we address the website. I know in preparation for today, I was trying to look at past agendas and meeting packets from 2022 and I couldn't find them. So it's a bit of a barrier to preparing and I think we need to figure out how we fix that. Commissioners, Measure 110, House Bill 4002. I think we are in the -33 version. I don't know if that's changed and become something else. But a lot of frustration from commissioners across the state. I think it was Wednesday of last week that you saw the email come through about, well, here's where we're at. And if you want to support this, sign on the dotted line by Friday at 5 p.m. and you'll be fast-tracked money. And there were not a whole lot of details as to what that actually means. And so a lot of commissioners said, I'm not signing something that doesn't have any details. Ultimately, I think it was 22 or 23 counties just bit the bullet and signed it just to see. But the rest of us did not because we were worried about this sort of legislate by hostage taking mentality. It is my view that big policy does not belong in the short session, but I realized that Measure 110 was such a crisis that needed to be dealt with that they tried and they're trying. But the reality is that it's just impossible for us to keep up on hundreds of pages of amendments that change every single day. And we rely on AOC to keep us informed. And even they, I think, struggle to keep up to date. So in a nutshell, House Bill 4002 in its current iteration recriminalizes hard drugs possession with a new Class U misdemeanor, which is more similarly reflects a Class B misdemeanor. So it does give us some tools in our tool bag back. It allows us to go after dealers who prey on vulnerable populations around parks or around low-income housing, vulnerable populations. It creates deflection programs and creates grant funding for deflection programs. We essentially already have deflection programs. We have a very successful drug court. We have pretrial diversion programs. Some counties don't have any of that. So I think that the deflection piece was really targeted towards counties that don't have those programs. It expands our welfare holds. So it expands the time that we get to place a welfare hold on somebody. And it also provides funding for medically assisted treatment, drug treatment in jail. So that's where we're at on that. At the end of the day, our OSSA and our sheriff and the DA's group, they are cautiously optimistic and supporting this. I think it's the best we can do at this time. And they want to see if we can work together to improve the situation. House Bill 5204, the -2 is the funding mechanism for this. And a little concerning that the counties that signed on the dotted line by 5 p.m. are included in the funding package as a fast track for funding. I think it only means they get 50% of their funding up front immediately. The rest of the counties, us included, will get some funding. It just will not be right away, and it will be subject to a grant process. I don't know how much money I don't think it's a lot. I've heard the number 150,000 thrown out there. I don't know. What's even more concerning is that as part of that funding package, there was a large section of nonprofits, specifically recovery nonprofits, that are magically getting millions and millions of dollars for detox programs, for residential treatment programs. And I'm talking $5 million here, $4 million here. And somehow those folks ended up in this funding package, despite the fact that they also endorsed and supported Measure 110. I think it's gross. I think that this is why we don't legislate by hostage taking, and we don't do big policy in the short session. But the bill's baked. It's too late to change it. And if we had known that, if counties had known that there was an opportunity for their nonprofits who didn't support Measure 110 and who are working on building detox facilities could apply for funding to the tune of millions of dollars, they would have been at the table and we would have pushed them there. It's shocking to me. Clearly, a set of people, a set of group of nonprofits were prompted ahead of time. They knew ahead of time that they should get their funding proposals in so that they can be on this short list. Very frustrating. There is no money for prosecution, which means that Brad's office is not going to receive any additional money to be able to handle processing these Class U misdemeanors. So going forward, and I'm just kind of giving a forewarning that is part of budget talks, I'm going to be asking Brad about that, because if we're getting, 8 of the 10 tools that we need in the set, and the other 2 tools can come from the county in order to fully enforce this and make sure that we are fully responding to Measure 110 and the problems, that's something that we're going to have to talk about. So just kind of a forewarning on that. But at the end of the day, our legislative delegation, Representative Elmer, Representative Scharf, would like to know where we stand as a body. I think the last time we talked about this, maybe, it was last week, we kind of were status quo. And I think at this point, I do want to be supportive of our sheriff and our DA as they try and navigate this and make it work for what's good for Yamhill County. So I would love to be able to say that we are cautiously optimistic and that that we're supporting our sheriff and our DA. So if there's consensus for that, I'm not talking about a formal process. I just, a phone call saying, yes, we discussed it and we want to support our sheriff and our DA.
I'd agree.
Okay. The next one I have is, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize our sheriff's deputies and the folks in our DA's office, juvenile detention programs, and our first responders in the county. We recently experienced the tragic loss of a young teen that took his life. And our folks witnessed it. They responded to it, and they are impacted by that greatly, because they're parents, because they have kids who are teens as well. And I just wanted to let them know that my thoughts had been with them since it happened, and that their grief is not overlooked. We do think of them and we do pray for them. It's really been quite an impact on the community. this young man was known far and wide. So just wanted to express that we're praying for them too. And on a lighter note, the West Valley Bulletin was recognizing National Set a Good Example Day. And they recognized the Grand Carolina Food Bank manager, Judy Adams, who's a wonderful person, as well as the student manager at Faulkner Chapman, Amanda Snook, for working on a new Thursday lunch bag program, which is servicing 16 families in Sheridan and delivering food boxes and recipes to those families in Sheridan. So shout out to them, and want to recognize their great service in our county. Any further announcements?
Real quick, I just want to share this COG acknowledgement regarding Stratus Village. We are named as one of the partners. As you know, the construction for Stratus Village in McMinnville will start in a couple of months. They're hoping in less than 2 years to have occupancy. And those are 61 one-bedrooms, 84 two-bedrooms, and 33 bedroom apartments for 30% to 60% of median income. So we are noted on this plat, which will bring back to the White House regarding Yamhill County being a considerably contributing to the Stratus Village project. Also had an opportunity to meet the new OHA director, Dr. Athy, and was able to share with her the fact that there are lots of different perspectives in the different counties, and hope that OHA would not continue to adopt the one size fits all regarding their contracts, that the counties should really have more input into how those contracts are executed and approved. And I was not alone in those sentiments. So hopefully we'll see a change in the new leadership at OHA.
Great, thank you. I saw the fairgrounds posted, we will announce our things in 2 weeks. And I was
Yeah,
like, oh,
I think March 2nd. I wrote down March 2nd.
oh, maybe it's not.
But they do have Fair Ambassador applications still open. That's like open till March 22nd.
Oh,
But
fair ambassador,
whole
yeah.
just the website issues, they're angry over there at the fairgrounds because they have this really nice Afton website and nothing can link to it, and their applications for Fair Ambassador were on there, and so they're trying to kind of do stuff through Facebook, and hopefully they're getting figured out and working with IT to figure out the website issues. And my understanding was March 2nd, keep an eye out for a Facebook post for the rest of the concerts that are going to be happening at the fairgrounds this summer. Last night went to the COG dinner. I just huge shout out to Grand Ron for hosting it. They never disappoint with their salmon and prime rib. It was a good time. Went super long, lots of awards. And that's all I got.
Did you win anything?
I know I did not win anything.
So the Fair Ambassador application, is it on the Facebook page?
It's on the Facebook page, and they extended it because they're having issues with accessing it through the new website, or the new website doesn't attach to the old Afton Fair website, which they really love that and want it to be attached to. They don't want the new fancy Yamhill County website. They want their own back. And they want it to link. They want it to, it's still there. They just want it to link accordingly. So like normally you type in Yamhill County Fair and Rodeo, it would take you to the Yamhill Fair and Rodeo Afton website. Now it doesn't. It takes you to Yamhill County. So Yamhill County hijacked the Yamhill County URL for the fair. I just know there's issues.
That sounds like an IT problem.
It is an IT problem. It's just I'm sure it's a quick little email to somebody. And that's all I
Okay.
got.
Okay. Any other announcements? Anything else for the good of the order? Nope. All right. I will adjourn the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for February 29th, 2024. It is Does that say 109? 109. Thank you.
Thanks.